Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. Frederick Osman. As the President of the Teachers Guild of New South Wales, I'm pleased to welcome you to the Concord Golf Club for our joint Teachers Guild of New South Wales and Wellbeing Australia Women in Leadership Forum and High Tea. I'd like to commence by expressing my gratitude to our wonderful panel for being here today in providing the opportunity to be inspired by women in leadership positions around Australia. Let's make them all feel very welcome. I would now like to welcome Mr. Glenn Johnston to provide the acknowledgement of country and connect the role of men and women's leadership. Thank you, Glenn.
Warami Midigar, which in my Darug Dalang or language means hello friends. My name is Glenn Johnston and I'm a proud Parramatta man of the Darug Nation. If Parramatta sounds familiar, that's our traditional name for Parramatta. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Pemel, or the lands of the Wongal of the Darug Nation where we are today, and also reach out to our people online today on the lands that you are on. The Darug Nation covers what we know as the Greater Sydney Basin, not defined by lines on a map, but by the natural boundaries. We have the Hawkesbury River to the north, the Nepean River to the west, and the Georges River to the south. The Darug Nation is made up of 29 clans. Aboriginal peoples have been the custodians of the lands and waterways of Australia and have carried educational practices and storytelling for over 2,000 generations. I pay sincere respects to my elders past and present for keeping our culture alive and take great pride that I am part of the longest living culture on Mother Earth. I would also like to reflect upon and remember the tens of thousands of Aboriginal people of the stolen generations, many of whom never made it home. The land we are on, the land where we live, work, breathe, eat and sleep on, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you. I just had a very quick reflection on my role and my representation as a male in women's leadership. It sounds a bit controversial or confronting, but as almost half of the the population, males do have a role to play. Now, I'm a champion of diversity and a very loud voice in that. There's other causes that I champion as well. I'm anti-racist, I'm anti-bullying. So I do have a number of hats that I wear in that space, but one of the ones that I'm really proud of is diversity, and I'm very loud and outspoken in two very key areas, and one is Aboriginal wellbeing and development, and the other one is gender and gender balance. In my mind, I don't know why we don't have gender balance across everything we do, but we don't. So part of my role is to be that loud male voice in the pale, stale male club, which is often out there, and we can joke about it, but it is a real thing. And I often find myself in that room, and I'm often the sole male diversity voice amongst what is almost an echo chamber of pale, stale male club. So I'm constantly banging the drum there about changing a whole range of things, and as I say, two of those key ones are gender and also Aboriginal influence and representation. So that was just my little tie-in to that. So hopefully that helps get our conversation going, and I very much look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn. Our moderator, Catherine Taylor, is a Director of Turning Point Consulting, a Centre of Excellence in Leadership, Change and Wellbeing, Board Member of Wellbeing Australia. With over 25 years' experience in education and corporate and human resources, leadership, organisational change, talent management and individual coaching. Catherine has been awarded a Career Management Fellowship and an Honorary Fellowship from the Teachers Guild of New South Wales for her work in leadership, wellbeing, transition across K-12 faith-based, independent department schools and delivering staff, student, parent initiatives to offer support in creating a platform for positive personal evaluation, planning and transition. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator, Catherine Taylor from Wellbeing Australia, which will introduce formally our panellists for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, I won't go on too much about me, but excited to be here today. So thank you to everyone who's joined us. Your high tea is coming, do not worry. Food will be here soon. For those who are joining at home, you will need to provide your own high tea. I'm sorry about that. But as Fred mentioned, I'm on a number of boards and heavily involved in this space of executive leadership and the change around what we need to see. On top of that, I'm also mother of three, so to me that's important when we speak about female leadership to have a holistic view. Same for men in leadership. We need to talk more about the full role of what our lives are. Certainly from a Wellbeing Australia point of view, that's what we're looking to do. Let's recognise the diversity of our lives and the whole platform that we're living within. So for those of you who don't know Wellbeing Australia, it is about positive, proactive strategies around protecting yourself and living your life, managing the downs as well as enjoying the ups, and really having that whole perspective. So we look at all elements of wellbeing. Our panel today are phenomenal. I'm very excited to be surrounded by these impressive women and a little daunted at the same time, I have to say. The flow of today will be, we will share some information from a panel point of view. On your tables, you will find post-it notes. We encourage you to please jot down any questions you have. There will be the opportunity for questions at the end of the panel. There is a gift and a prize for the best question, I have to say as well. Thanks to Rhonda. So please do jot those down and we will come to those later on. The food will come out shortly and you can enjoy that. And for those at home, grab your cup of tea. So just to start off, I think it's important for us to know who's in the room and who's speaking with us. So I might start off by just introducing Georgina, so Commissioner Georgina Whelan, who you may recognise from television. You do have a face that media loves, who has been heavily involved in defence from a state, from a national level, a lot of crisis management, obviously an emergency at the moment, so you must love keeping busy. And so to me, something that probably you're exposed to more than others would be that media and that crisis management on an ongoing basis. So can you share a little bit about yourself with us, please?
Thank you. My pleasure. Good morning to everybody here in the audience and to our audience at home. Yes, I'm Georgina Whelan. I spent 33 years in the Army, my first career, and focused on humanitarian aid, disaster relief and operational health capability. I had a career change at the ripe old age of 50 and transitioned from the Army into the ACT Emergency Services Agency, initially as the Chief Officer of the State Emergency Service, and then I was promoted into the Commissioner's role 3 years ago, 2 months before the 2019-2020 Black Summer Fires. I have had the privilege of leading and managing in crisis throughout my career, and I say a privilege because it's a privilege to lead the people who actually deliver the outcomes for our communities both here and in Australia, and on a number of occasions have had to front the media and deal with higher level government inquiries, and I've been very fortunate to have been given access to the professional development that is necessary to prepare yourself to be the spokesperson or the leader in times of crisis. In my real job, I am married. I have 4 children, 3 daughters through various stages of university, and a son who is very unique, His uniqueness, his uniqueness is that he has Down syndrome, and as a consequence of that, I have been very fortunate to have been supported by and mentored by many, many parents and adults from the Australian Down syndrome community. We are a very proud community that promote the ability and the uniqueness of our children. Yes, my son does call me a loser on occasion. And a husband who's a retired firefighter who runs our home, which allows me to do the job I do as the Commissioner in the ACT. I'd also like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people and the land in which I have the privilege of living. It's because of the support I have received from our First Nations people in teaching me to value the land in which I live on, that I can lead 2,500 people to protect the land for the community that we serve.
Beautifully said. Rhonda, welcome to you. Rhonda Van Zel, who you've had a fantastic background. I'm going to let you hand because I know you've prepared for this. Board and executive roles, regional, state, national, a lot with the War Widows Association, but I might let you do your own spiel.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your service. I'm a bit different to everybody else probably on the panel. I was born the eldest of three girls in rural New South Wales. I rode a horse to school, which was a one room, one teacher, and we were all in the one room. That was all 9 of us. In winter, the classroom was heated by a pot-belly stove, and we used to toast our sandwiches on the pot-belly stove. On a very hot summer day that could get up into the high 30s or 40 degrees, school was outside underneath a peppercorn tree. I left school after the intermediate, aged 15, and worked on the family farm. I worked on the farm for about 5 years, and during that time Mum taught me to sew all my own clothes, to knit and to cook. I'm not bad at either of them. My first money was made on the farm from picking up newly dropped lambs in the dead of the night. These lambs had been rejected by their mothers because of the drought. I take them home, warm them up, and then teach them how to have a titty bottle. And at one stage I had over 50 lambs, all being fed 3 times a day. While working on the farm, I went to TAFE and did a wool classing course. I was the first woman in New South Wales to gain a wool classing certificate. This then allowed me to work in other sheds at shearing time. That was the second lot of my income. I then left the farm and went to work in Wagga in the fashion business. After a successful 18 months, I opened my own franchise of the business in Tumut in the days of the snowy. And boy, was that a risk for me. This is where I met my husband. It was a whirlwind romance. We met and married within 12 months, and no, I wasn't pregnant. But he did come with 3 small boys. He was a widow, and so he came with 3 small boys, and then we had 2 girls. So I was the mother of 5, and we were married for 42 years. When Bruce became ill, we sold up the farm and the family business and moved to Sydney. Very soon I became bored with retirement, and I decided to go, and I had always loved real estate, so I joined a real estate agent on the North Shore, and within 12 months I was the top salesperson. It was this time I realised I was actually very good at selling, very good at talking to people, and very good at making them make my decisions. And I had a database to die for, and I'm happy to talk about that afterwards. But I was known as a database queen, and I still use that database today, and I still add to it every day. In 1991, I went to court to get the first enterprise agreement, and that was an interesting exercise. In 1996, I met Dr. Brendan Nelson. I then spent the next 13 years working for him as Chief of Staff. When he retired, so did I. So that was the second time I've retired. I'm about to do the third time, right? In 2007 to 2029, I've spent these years in the not-for-profit area. Personally, I've challenged myself by working the Kokoda track 3 times for 3 different reasons, and that taught me a lot. In my spare time, I help, support and mentor women, and I believe we rise by lifting others. Thank you.
Fantastic. And we're all different. That's why we're on this panel, because we don't want to listen to everyone being exactly the same, but phenomenal brief there. Look at you. Renee, you're going to follow that. So Renee Larkin has an extensive background in human resources, recruitment, executive, coaching, management, leadership from an Australian and an Asia-Pac perspective. A lot of different industries, but a lot of work in that medical healthcare device space, which is constantly expanding. So Renee.
Thank you. I'll just turn this on, it helps.
Is it?
Hello, testing? Yes, hello. Thank you, and thank you for having me today. There's definitely some synergies with the panel today. I'm already discovering. I am originally from regional New South Wales, so I grew up in Wagga Wagga, and I'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people. So that's where my grounding started. I grew up in a suburb, not in the country on a farm, but that was my family. They were all on farms, and so I was always the curious child, as much as my mother didn't love, that wanted to go travel the world at 19 with the backpack. Could you imagine? No Facebook, no Find My Person anywhere across the world, ringing from the phones. And I always wanted to go and adventure and explore my life, which I'm grateful for my family for growing and raising me to have that courage. I ended up I also joined real estate as well. I had a stint in real estate, got my licence, but I moved to Sydney and I was too young, to be honest, to take on real estate in Sydney. I wasn't mature enough. And I ended up in consulting and recruitment. And that's where I really found my passion for business, passion for people. Going in and out of all these large organisations, adding value and placing some wonderful talent. I stayed in that space for a long time and consulting into medical, healthcare, local and global. I even then decided to have my own business. So I backed myself. And that's what I really learnt a lot about myself. Running your own business is quite a big gig and you need a lot of confidence, and it's a real roller coaster. But I did it for about 6 years, loved it. But then that natural itch came along again and I wanted more. My kids were settled and I wanted to get into something corporate and global again. So I joined a large medical device organisation, Cochlear, in a global role, and that was massive. And that taught me again really about backing yourself, believing in yourself, learning from others, growing continuously, empowering myself and others. And that's pretty much what I've done since, and I'm still in the medical device space. Again, real job. I am a mum and a wife. I try to be good at all things, but that is really, honestly, my real job. I also have a beautiful boy with autism, and that has honestly been my biggest gift, because he has taught me what it's like to have diversity, to look at the world through diverse lenses, through corporate, through community, through schooling. And I've also got another child who is in the wind there and he's off to schoolies today. So I had some tears this morning before I came here, but I'm okay now. And I've got a Labradoodle and the husband in the wind sometimes. He's an accountant. So, so that is my life. And I'm just really excited to be here to share any pearls and also learn some pearls from others. And thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And feeding on from Renee's comment about your own business and those sorts, it's something we hear from a lot of young women aspiring to lead their own businesses, become entrepreneurs and so on and so forth, which is where the lovely Kathy DeMarcos comes to join us on the panel, who is involved at a global level in a lot of transformation and change work. And it is something we hear a lot about, and as Glenn rightly mentioned, it's part of what we're talking about when we're talking about women in leadership. So, Kathy, I know that you're involved heavily in a number of different areas in terms of being an ambassador and being a keynote speaker and consulting through. Can you share, please?
Thank you. I'm shy. No?
I know, it's funny.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That's the most common phrase, right? On Zoom, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So I think we all actually have a jagged road to where we, and I will say, choose to be. So at 17, I thought that I actually wanted to become a doctor, and it was a passion that I'd had for a really long time, but I grew up with a father that was incredibly ill and a mother who actually had 3 jobs to put me through private education. And it dawned on me that I actually needed to pay things forward and contribute. So when I was given the opportunity to go into banking, I thought, why not? Never did I think that I'd follow in the footsteps of my older brother, 10 years my senior, because that's where he was. But that's where I landed, and in my first week, I was sent home, and I have to show you why. I didn't wear a skirt, I wore pants. So I had an incredibly beautiful mentor, and she quickly actually called me over when I arrived that day wearing a pantsuit and said, I think you need to go home. And she was looking out for me. It was in my best interest that I actually really went home to change. But I don't know why I found my voice, but I did. And I said, I've read the handbook. It says women can wear trousers. And I stayed. But I think I realised very naively that having a voice just enabled us to think differently, right? Just because something was done a particular way didn't mean that that's the way it always needed to be. Some weeks later, Kay and all the other women started to wear trousers.
Well done.
I did have that conversation with, I won't say his name, but, and it was a difficult one, but it was okay, and it was difficult for both of us, right? Some 10 years later, I still stayed in banking and finance, and it was through the GFC, but I actually had some challenging times. I had to repossess homes and businesses, and I was very good at my job, but one night I actually had one of my clients who was suicidal ring me, and it was late. So the fact that she called me thinking that I would be there, again, I don't know why, but it actually just goes to show that it doesn't matter how good we are at our jobs, if we can't actually really respect and honour the people that we're actually in the presence of, we haven't quite mastered it. So at that time, I actually realised I needed to study. I needed to really understand how I could support people. So I studied for 4 years, and I then practiced for 3 years and became a qualified counsellor. And I've taken all of those skills into everything that I've done. Well, when Ebola broke out, my beautiful 16-year-old daughter said, we're going to Africa. And I went, what? You know the voice of babes? We need to listen sometimes. And so, despite my husband saying, no, you're not, I said, hang on a minute, let's have a look at what else can happen. And so we did. She took off for a month before I joined her for the next 2 months. By the time I arrived, she could speak Swahili. We embedded ourselves living with families. We lived with the Maasai. And at that point, I realised my own privilege, my own biases, and thought, what can I do differently? And I cried, not because for me, but because of how much more could be done. So I continued all of that, my career being in finance, but embedding those human skills. At that point, I realised I could do more. So we developed what I actually now call leadership programs for young kids. I actually embedded programs called microfinance in Tanzania, working with projects abroad for women. And I now run leadership programs that I fund for young kids all the way through to aspiring entrepreneurs. My business is, I am a consultant. My passion is financial literacy and economic security for women, for children, because change is actually needed for what they want. And the one thing that we all want is freedom, whatever that means for you. But we have to actually know how to actually get us there. So that's what I actually strive for. So for me, it's actually about the impact that we all want to contribute to. So despite me being a numbers person, I've written multiple award-winning books, and I've done 2 TEDx talks, and I speak. It's not because I'm comfortable in doing that, but it's because I've made a conscious decision that I want to contribute and pay things forward. So that's me.
Beautiful. Well said.
Thank you.
And it's fabulous to see that evolution in terms of the industry that you've been in as well, because through, as you say, GFC and other things, there's such significant changes you're sort of facing. So Heather,
Okay.
you're wrapping up our panel introduction. So our program said Kim McCabe would be here from the Australian Museum. Unfortunately, Kim is unwell, so the lovely Heather has stepped in and given her weekend to us, and we do appreciate
so
that.
I'm very sorry that I'm not Kim, because she's fabulous. But
Heather, so are you.
so kia ora koutou atu Māori, good morning. It's great to be here. I'm a New Zealander, but I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Australian Museum. So in that role, it covers everything from looking after property, technology, security, people, finance, legal, procurement, and all the commercial activities that the museum operates. So it's a big and busy role, and what's fantastic about working for a museum and in the cultural sector is it really encompasses so many kind of important strands and aspects, from research to educational aspects to creativity, and really bringing joy to so many lives. It really is a privilege to work in the sector. So I've been in the museum and cultural sector for about 10 years. I've also been the Chief Operating Officer at Auckland Museum. I've been a director at the V&A Museum in London, and returned from London during COVID, really when my family became split between sort of London and the Antipodes. So it's great to be back. So like my fellow panelists, careers take a long and winding paths, and mine too has been like that. So I started my career as a New Zealand diplomat, working in Wellington and then at the United Nations in New York. And at the end of my posting, I returned to New Zealand, married the boy that, I'd gone out with in university, and then left the Foreign Service. I worked as a lawyer in New Zealand and London, and then moved into senior public sector roles within the New Zealand government, including leading some commissions of inquiry and a major amalgamation of the councils in Auckland. And then I got the call one day, how would you like to be the Chief Operating Officer at Auckland Museum? I said, I've never worked in a museum before. They said, no problem, we'll teach you. And it really is wonderful, towards the end of my career, to have come to a place which is really a coincidence of my personal interest in the arts, creativity, education and making, and I guess my professional skills in knowing how to run things and how to get things done. So in my real life, I have a husband, 2 children who are just leaving university, and in terms of weird connections, my husband also comes from a farm in Taihape, a sheep farm in New Zealand, and his father was a wool classer too. So it's a great launching pad, right? Who would have thought? Thank you very much.
Beautiful. So, looking at the breadth of our industries, and I guess one of the key themes, or what we see in the news, in media, in conversations around leadership for women is, well, what are the skills? Do you have the skills? Do you have the competence to be a leader? Where is that coming from? So, just going to ask each of you to reflect and maybe share, and Heather, you might kick us off as you've got the mic there. The top sort of 2 or 3 skills you feel are critical for leadership, and whether you had them naturally or whether they're things you've developed.
Well, I think there are many skills. But I think for me it's probably fortitude, persistence, humour, and I guess the ability to form strong and enduring relationships, whether it's with the people that you work or people that you encounter along the way. I think those are the keys, or have been for me, in terms of my leadership journey.
Yeah. Isn't humour critical to it all? I might hand to Rhonda and then you can pass to Georgina.
Oh, goodness me. Who in the room belongs to another organisation, a not-for-profit organisation? Who's working somewhere else? That's the problem. Volunteering?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to come at it in a different way. You can learn so many leadership skills and see whether you're going to be a leader. There's nothing like having to work with volunteers.
Yep.
They all know it. They've all done it. It's just the glass went in half, that's all. So I'm just going to say simply, take yourself off, whatever your other passion is besides your career, go and get involved in that, because you learn all the leadership skills and you can move yourself up. So I started off very simply with my children at school, and I got to the stage they were away at boarding school, and I didn't like what the school was doing, so I formed the Board of Parents Association, and we then had a very strong voice in the school. And I raised hundreds of thousands of dollars through the borders at school. And I learnt to sow into women at that point. And I suggest everyone can sow into each other in leadership, and then you decide whether you will be a leader or whether you want to walk closely with someone else. It's very important for a woman, when you do lead, to have other women who believe in you and walk with you. So in my case, I was about to be the president of a national major political party, and I met Dr. Brennan Nelson. And I changed my whole career to support him, because I realised I could achieve a lot more by being his number two than taking on my career as I wanted to do it. And so I had opportunities I could never believe in not taking on my career, but supporting someone else. I was only sorry I didn't do it for a woman at that stage. But anyway, that's another story.
Kathy, do you want to join here?
Oh. Hello. Okay. I would say become anti-fragile.
Yes.
You know, I think we are innately resilient, but it's actually being able to take away the lessons and strengthen from them, and then have the confidence to actually step forward. And it's okay to say no. I think that's the other thing that I have learnt is no isn't actually letting somebody down, but it's actually enabling you to focus on the choices that you want to make. You know, if we know the impact that we want to make, then it's okay for you to actually say yes to you.
Thank you. I always say to my children, are you active listeners? Because particularly when you are in a position or an appointment of leadership where the title says you're the leader, a leader can only be as effective as the people that are around them, the decisions that we make, and we can only do that by acquiring information and being aware of our surroundings and understanding. So we all talk about inclusion and diversity, and sometimes we talk about them in separate stances rather than it actually being a partnership. And so if we want to get diversity of thought, it's not just about having token representation in the room, it's also about creating the inclusive environment where those diverse thoughts and ideas can be brought forward, but they will never come to fruition if, as a leader, we are not actively listening to those ideas and allowing those to inform the decisions that we make. So quite often I have to remind myself also to be an active listener, because we can get into a routine of nodding and thinking about the next meeting that we're going to rather than what is happening in front of our faces. The second one I would reinforce is it's really hard some days being a leader. And quite often there will be times when others will use an opportunity, and you are that opportunity for them to influence decisions of others. So for me, it's not just about the resilience of being able to work through those issues, it's actually learning when to not take things personally, but to understand the real politic of the environment in which you may be working. And that is across all industries, at all levels. And it doesn't mean that you depersonalise everything. The human interaction, the human instincts are very important, but learning to have a little bit of a thick skin and not taking it too personally so that you can lead with influence rather than lead with emotion is really, really important.
Different lenses again, but very much in agreement with the panel. I think from what I'm learning with, fast-growing tech companies and just the way the world's moving, agility is used a lot now and needs to be used more. I think it's okay to give something a go and fail quickly, but fail quickly and change it and acknowledge it and share it. Some of the best leaders I've seen coming through have that stakeholder engagement down packed. Their authenticity shines through. They can engage people and connect, that active listening. And with their teams as well, that inclusivity, they're taking everybody on that journey with decision making as well. It's not about I, it's about we, and it's the inclusive, diverse nature of their teams. That's becoming quite strong now. Communication skills, presentation skills, all of those things are really stepping up for women, and I think that's the norm, and it's becoming stronger and stronger. And I also think confidence, and I know that's hard, you've got to be uncomfortable in a leadership role. Like sometimes, I know in my younger days with Catherine working, getting up to speak, I used to tremble and shake and think it was the worst, and now I think it's quite comfortable just to share knowledge, and some days I don't love it, but that's my biggest message for emerging leaders, is to really get uncomfortable, because when you get in those positions, it actually gives you the confidence to think, I can do it, and then you're not afraid to ask for what you want moving forward because your confidence is growing. So this is a couple of snippets from me.
Great, and have fabulous diversity, right? There's a common link where we're saying it really comes back to understanding who we are either serving or working with, but also who we are trying to collaborate to make things happen. So there's a difference there, and I love your point, Rhonda, about giving back or being in that different space, because something I've noticed from when you guys are sharing is it's not a straight line, right? I think there's a perception, and I think certainly for young girls, and many of us have daughters, the perception from school is you need to be the new leaders who are changing the world, and you need to do it in this way. Whereas I think, to take your point, it's really about us understanding ourselves and gaining confidence in ourselves to go from there. There's shifts in terms of leadership in particularly traditionally male-dominated industries, or as you mentioned, Renee, emerging. So maybe if we touch on, Tgnsw, I think you have fantastic experience of those more male-dominated industries, and Renee from the healthcare, and definitely the arts and culture. Heather, if we can start with you, Georgina.
Thank you. I think I have seen Georgina Whelan's view of the world, the best and the worst of being in the minority gender-wise when it comes to the workplace. So 30 years in the military, 30 years, yeah, exactly. I look back and I laugh as well. So when I'll tell you a little story. So this is another 6 degrees of separation. So when I was accepted into the Royal Military College of Duntroon to complete my officer training, I was selected as the first Australian female to go on an exchange program to the Officer Cadet School, New Zealand. Boy, was I excited. New Zealand, skiing, grass. They didn't tell me where Waiyuru was. Oh my God. Exactly. So a volcano, a dead one, lots of rock, freezing cold. So got to New Zealand and was the only woman in my company, and we started with 8 women on the course and graduated with 3. And 74 on the course, graduating with 28, very high attrition rate. And I remember, being so proud that I'd made it through right to the end, despite a broken ankle, pelvic stress fractures, and a whole bunch of other things that go with not understanding gender-based training. But I got through, and I was in line with my 5 other Australian male colleagues. And the then Chief of the Defence Force, and I won't say what year it was, but then Chief of the Defence Force came out to meet us all. And I was at the end of the line, and he worked his way through the 5 gentlemen and said, and what corps are you going to, son? Armoured Corps, sir. What corps are you going to, son? Infantry, sir. What corps are you going to, son? Artillery Corps. Got to me and said, and I presume you're going to the Catering Corps, Miss Whelan. So didn't even ask me what corps I was going to. And I said, well, actually, sir, I thought I might go to Armoured Corps myself. And he just sort of looked at me and then a little bit of a giggle and moved on and clearly mentioned something to my commanding officer, who then berated me for being rude to the Chief of the Defence Force. But that was the era in which I joined the Defence Force. Wasn't expected to serve beyond getting married. And certainly when that rule changed, wasn't expected to serve on after having children. I have to say though, my strongest supporters in my career in the Defence Force was 3 men. 3 men who seriously understood what being a champion for change is and having a voice and representing, not fixing women's problems, because that's the language that was used back then. Let's have all these committees to fix the woman problem or fix women's problems. But men who understood the environment was not conducive to getting the best out of 50% of the population. And at that stage, 11% of the Australian Army. Came through after 30 years, saw some great things happening, but also learnt that it's important for me to make myself available as well. And I say that in terms of, I very quickly observed, as the only woman in a boardroom, that before the meeting starts, there always small talk. And I had to understand and appreciate that the small talk, when it is all men in the room, usually is about the cricket and the footy and what happened on the weekend. And I had to learn that that was okay. So for a couple of years, I took the time to chat with my husband on Sunday night about the cricket and the footy and all these things, so that I could actually be engaged in the small talk. And then being included in the conversation then allowed me to shape the conversation. And it was not unusual within a year for us to be talking about cupcakes for our kids, because once they felt comfortable with me and I felt comfortable with them, I would then throw some anecdotes in, and it changed the environment in which we were operating. But I had to learn that I had to put myself out there, and I had to have a go, and I had to learn the dialect, because it's just a dialect that was in the room. Joining the emergency services, I do feel like I went back a decade or 2, and that is because the now Fire Brigade, that is one of the 4 services for the agency I'm responsible for, has the lowest participation rate of women in the country. And I am now learning new ways to engage to see how we can shape that. So, yep, it was tough. There were times when it was lonely, but I tried to shape and influence in a constructive way, and I made myself available for the people that were putting themselves out there to mentor me and bring me on that journey. My 3 daughters do not have any of the fear I had when I was their age, and I take that as a positive sign that there is generational change, and eventually people won't notice the difference. But it's conversations like these and keeping those conversations going that will allow us to talk about that was then and this is now, if sort of that makes sense. But yes, I'm so glad I didn't go to Catering Corps, because I can't cook to save myself.
In terms of the medical industry, that medical healthcare industry, do you think there is a difference in terms of the expectations, or what are the challenges? Because medical there's elements where it's more female dominated than male. So is there a difference in what's expected of female leaders in that environment compared to what Georgina's just shared?
Yeah, so having experience working with a, amazing medtech organisation, hundreds and hundreds of engineers, and that background and manufacturing is male predominant, orientated. So trying to get female diversity in there and growing that talent pool was really tough. And yeah, a lot of change management. It was also amazing to see D&I actively introduced heavily throughout the organisation and recorded on, and it was daily practice. So that was really transformational for me, coming from years of when I started in work, people would smoke in the office and all of that craziness, and very old school environments, to very progressive. I think there are different pockets in healthcare where it can be very male dominated, and trying to shift that dial, or including females in that audience or in that room. But it is definitely changing. One of the role models I have in human resources that's really empowered me many years in my career, I asked her one day, I said, how have you seen change when it comes to females being included in the room, or what's really empowered you to be really an advocate, because she's a massive advocate for this change. And she said, one day I was walking along, it was off-site, and I had head of legal, I had the COO, and we were going into a meeting. One of them, gentleman, turned around to me and gave me his jacket to hang up. And the other turned around and said, give that to me, gave it back to the person that handed it, and said, you hang that up. And that changed. She was a junior in HR at that time. And she said that changed my view of the corporate world of balance forever, and one making the other one right. So it's there, it's still there, but we are progressing slowly.
And I agree with your point, both of you, that it's the process of moving forward, right? That's what we're looking at, is those steps. Heather, what about the arts culture industry? Because that would have a different mix again.
Yeah, so I guess I've worked in a mix of industries, so, probably in the legal fraternity and also in diplomacy. It's when I was working there, very male dominated, hierarchical, and I think, particularly as a young woman, you were ignored or sort of tolerated at best. So so really it was necessary to find paths to navigate that, and probably like you, I too found ways to work through that. I guess in the cultural sector, it's different. It is an industry where probably it would be 60% women, so women are dominant. It is less diverse than one would wish, and that is because often people don't do art history degrees. It's seen as a kind of, certainly in Europe, as something that is the preserve of a particular sort of class, or it is not something that is generally done and seen as accessible, and that I think is a real problem for the cultural sector, and one that they're desperately trying to address. I mean, in New Zealand and Australia, it's different because we have such a sort of a strong First Nations presence across all the work that we do in the cultural sector. But just kind of reflecting on it generally, I think that it's just incredibly important to have leaders, and they can be sort of women or men who are just really strong and purposeful about making sure that there is good gender balance, that there's fairness in the workplace, and that promote diversity and inclusion, and probably like the other women on this panel, the breaks that you get are not necessarily. They do not necessarily come from the places you'd expect. That it will be, somebody, male or female, will step forward and make a clear point and change things in really positive ways. But I think it needs to be purposeful, and when it is purposeful, you see it changing to great effect. And turning back to that point about generational change, I'm reflecting on my own kids. They're very comfortable with, they've learnt te reo, although they're Pākehā, white like me. They've learnt te reo Māori at school. They're completely comfortable in te ao Māori, which is, the Māori world. And so I would expect, and the way they relate to women and their friends and the way they think about women in the workplace is completely different from probably, when I started out. And I think that's a sort of such a tremendous sort of hope and, the realisation that change is here and it's happening.
Yeah.
And
I think it is because of all of that everyone is doing, and because we are starting to see that traction. And I think that comfort in discomfort is a really important point, and that learning to find that way to connect and those sources of how. It's interesting, all those stories that you guys are sharing, where we've got those moments where it's either someone that we know who's sharing that moment that they sort of saw, hang on a minute, I've got an opportunity, I can have a voice or I can create a change, or this is the person, these are the people who can advocate. And Georgina, I agree, a lot of the leaders that have empowered and supported me have actually been men as much as women in that space. Interestingly, I went for a job in hospitality and was told I couldn't have it because I was a young female who was going to have children and leave. So how are we meant to get work? I don't know. But it is interesting because I remember I was a senior leader very young, comparatively to those that I was working with, and they were all males. And I remember being told when I was going into executive or board meetings or presentations that, I needed to be aware that my voice wasn't as important because I was young. I didn't have grey hair. That was a quite specific one. I didn't know what I was meant to do with that. And that, I was there to represent women, so not to contribute, which was a fascinating combination of ideas. So I guess a question, and Rhonda, I might kick off with you and then Kathy ask you to join. Was there moments in your career where you finally felt like a leader for a reason? Was there a crisis? Was there a mentor? Was there a moment where you went, oh, hang on a minute, I'm actually making change, or I'm in my space? Because as you rightly said, sometimes leading is leading through others. It's a gift women have. Leading through others, not necessarily being that public space or voice. So what are your thoughts?
Well, that's a hard question.
That's why I gave it to you.
Because as women, we are there to move forward. And I think some of the other girls have talked about, we weren't seen as leaders. So the ability to step up was slow to happen, I think. And for, the young women here, and I remember the crisis is because you're a woman and a mother, right, in some senses. But I remember saying to a friend of mine who was, she's there ironing her son's shirts. And I said to her, do you know what? You're going to be responsible for your son's divorce and my daughter's divorce, right? Because, right, her husband was a triple M, a middle-aged misogynist male, right? And so it's the mothers sometimes. We've got to encourage, I think, and I've gone away from what you've asked, but I think it comes back to, did I have a crisis? It was probably that thing when I saw Lorraine, who's not with us anymore, that I realised that I had a lot to do because that was making it very difficult. And for me, I never had a career. Like, I left school, I never went to anything afterwards. So I never saw myself as a career. I think I always saw myself as someone who could lead. But it was rural, it was local, it was, that's what I said earlier about getting involved. And, you know, if you're leading an organisation, no one worries if you fall over. It just happens, right? They don't criticise you. So you have the experience of leading. Unlike yours is very structured. I mean, I'm a war widow, so I know what you're talking about. And I admire you for doing it in those days. It was very hard. But coming back to, I never had a crisis, but I saw this woman going to cause crises. So I stepped up.
So from a career perspective, I can certainly relate to a lot of what's been shared. I mean, I was, you know, one of 6 females out of 150 males. And the workload, I can tell you, you know, they had a caseload of 16 businesses and I had 32. But that actually, it never bothered me. For me, you know, leadership is actually about having a voice and being authentic. So when I walked into the boardroom, I was the only female. But guess what? I hugged, because that's what I do. I didn't put out my hand. I was genuinely just me, because that was the only thing I knew how to be. I didn't want to actually wear pants and a suit, so I intentionally didn't. And I think that's the one thing, you don't have to have a title. You know, in fact, I actually, my HR person used to say to me, Kathy, you have to have a title. People need to know who you are. And I went, they do know. I have a name. So I didn't, for many years, actually have a title. I didn't need to actually follow what everybody else was telling me I needed to be or to do to lead. You know, so if that's one thing that I could share, and you know, I think I actually showed that to my kids. My son's actually 5 years or 4.5 years, they quabble over that, older than my daughter. Guess what he got when he was 4? An iron. And he was actually shown how to actually chop and stand up on a bench. And he's the best cook, Fred. He's the best cook, you know. So we need to actually really think about diversity and really show our kids how to be diverse, rather than actually turning it the other way around.
So, you know, my entire career I have worn a uniform, I have had rank on my shoulders, and that rank has always designated me the leader. However, there are 3 key points in my life where I really had to be a leader and my rank had nothing to do with it, and I realised what leadership was about. The first one was I deployed the Australian Field Hospital to the Boxing Day tsunami in Sumatra in 2004, 2005. And it would not have mattered how much rank I had on my shoulders or what my title was. It was realising that I was leading 154 people into an environment where 300,000 people had lost their lives, where the entire community had been devastated, and our job was not just to respond, but also to help rebuild the community. The second instance I recall is having been appointed the Commissioner and 6 weeks later, the 1920 bushfire season. And my job was not to be the best firefighter on the ground. I have fabulous human beings who are the best firefighters. My job was to lead the community through crises, given the impact the 2003 bushfires had had on the ACT. And the final one is actually a really interesting one. When I had my second child, she was only 3 months old when I was deployed to East Timor in 1999, and into a warlike environment. And a fellow female colleague said to me, "How can you leave your daughter?" And I said to her, if I was a police officer or a nurse or a doctor in a hospital, would you ask me, how can I leave my child to go to work? well, no, they're really important jobs. And I said, and defending our country and our region is equally as important. So just being brave enough to say, don't devalue me, that in and of itself, I actually think was, took the courage of a leader to be able to say that on behalf of other women, to show that, you know, both our roles as parents, regardless of gender, and the job that pays our mortgage are important, but don't ever make somebody feel guilty for actually doing their job.
And I think it's those other people and their judgments that people bring to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's often based on assumptions and on their own sort of tainting of what they've seen. You've all highlighted some really important areas where there is the opportunity to continue the growth, continue expanding female leadership or female voice. And I think when we're speaking about leadership, and you've all touched on this, it's not necessarily about the badge. I know yours is a very formal, structured industry, but it's not necessarily about the title, as Kathy rightly said, but about that influence and that opportunity to have voice. I guess from a talent management, Renee, I'll hand to you because this is your world. Talent management, so from an organisational perspective, what are the informal and the formal things we should be thinking about to have a genuine and authentic approach to empowering and you know, aspiring leaders?
Yeah. This has got like a delay, this mic.
That's okay.
Look, there's different things that are being done well in organisations, and I think progressive organisations are really right into mentoring programs. I know it sounds a little cliche, but talent management, that should be just a standard amongst organisations. Like, who are your performing, high-performing, developing, especially when it comes to getting female leaders, rising them through. Something that I know is a strong focus on where I'm working now is just mentoring across, empowering, and not just male and female, everybody from all levels, and setting up a solid program to empower others. I think there has been that natural thought to, okay, 3 top levels of layers and progressing people that way. I think we need to look at people for people and progressing, empowering, mentoring that way. And that's what I see a lot of the, you know, fast-growing companies doing now, because they don't want to lose their people and they want to get the most out of them. So that's what I know, and that's what I'm seeing now.
Did you want to add on?
I think every smart leader or employer needs to be looking for that talent within their organisation and really promoting opportunity for that talent, not only to continue to evolve and develop professionally, but in some cases even fast-tracking them a little bit, not too much, because we don't want to set people up for failure, but fast-tracking them into opportunities they wouldn't normally be given. And again, I don't think we should be apologising for that. It's about equity, and it's also about merit. And when we start to use the right language around why somebody has been encouraged to make themselves available for a talent management program, and why we might give somebody an opportunity in a role that traditionally they may have not been afforded, we shouldn't have to apologise for that, because what we are doing is not just investing in individuals, but investing in the company or the business or the organisation in which we work for, which then every member of the organisation then benefits from. One of my proudest moments is when somebody I mentored overtook me. And a colleague said, "Are you upset by that?" I said, "Actually, no. I invested a lot of time and effort into that individual because I knew she was better than me. Like, I knew she had in her, in this particular work environment, far greater skill than I would ever have. And I was very happy to be there on the day she got promoted. And I don't think we should be shy and be frightened that the people we mentor and we develop may, in fact, overtake us. We should be celebrating their success."
Can I just say something? I've gone. I think the mentoring, I made a note when I was coming here, we don't think to mentor until we start to move up the tree. What you need to do with your first job for the younger girls here, younger women, is to find somebody, and you don't have to have the same mentor all the way through, because I might have a certain skill to a certain point, and then you need to meet on and find someone else. It's just a conversation sometimes to say it's okay to go and do that or not to do it. You just don't have, when you first start off, I think we talked earlier about feeling that we can do it. It needs encouragement. And if it's not coming from your workplace, that's why you have a mentor outside. I think what you're saying is mentoring starts when you get your first job. Like when you get your first job and you start to save, you need to get a mentor when you have your first job. But don't think you've got to keep them your entire life.
So I'd agree with all that. I mean, I think absolutely within an organisation there needs to be a structured approach to talent management, and it needs to be purposeful and planned, and so not a kind of a reactive, but really a planned approach to it. I think personally also that as women, as you move through various stages and experiences, I think all of us think that you have a kind of a personal obligation to really give back. If somebody asks you for advice or help, actually to do that on the way through. And you do encounter, some women and men who are not like that, who do reach sort of particular positions and what's that quote? Hell. There's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. Who said that? It's the Secretary of State for Madeleine Albright, and I actually believe that. If somebody asks, then you really do have an obligation to help. The other point that I just wanted to touch on is sort of governance, and I'm still pretty shocked. Both in Australia and in New Zealand, not so much in sort of public sector organisations, but within private sector and major companies, there's still quite a lot of gender imbalance. And I think that, again, it's a kind of a structured approach, continuing to shine a light on it, point out the reasons why gender balance and diversity is a really good thing for organisations and companies and growth, and to have particular programs to advance change in those areas. So yeah, I'm all about make it planned, and when you're asked to help.
And I think that's a really critical one, that informal piece, that everybody can have that impact to continue empowering others, but the formality of going beyond numbers, going beyond saying we're an organisation that has this many women on our board or this many women in our organisation or something, and having a meaningful program. Kathy, did you have a couple of quick tips to add there?
I certainly don't advocate for quota, and I don't actually advocate for tenure. So for me, it's actually up to each of us to actually make ourselves redundant and to actually bring others up as we rise, so that they can do, what you actually shared earlier. That is what we all should be striving for. That's what real leadership is about.
Well said. Just want to jump, we've all mentioned that we have a crazy idea, lives outside of our work, outside of our professional world. The research is still coming back, and we saw this a lot throughout lockdown and throughout COVID with, hang on a minute, women are still carrying the load at home, women are still doing this. Now, my family, I was very fortunate to have my 3 children, and my husband actually carried part-time work to be able to be there for my girls, and so we've got to really balance. I know, Georgina, you've mentioned that as well. What do you guys think in terms of that advice for young females who are going, well, eventually I do want to have a family, or I don't know how that goes, because it can be a fierce this space of, but do I have to have a career at the cost of not having a family? And I know, Rhonda, you keep saying, I haven't had a career. You have had a career. You've had a phenomenal career. So it's that space of that confidence in ourselves. But what would your advice, and maybe Kathy, you can kick us off, for young females who are going, but I know I want a career, but I know I want a family. How does that work?
You can have it all. You really can. I actually don't know why it's even a debate. 30 odd years ago, my husband actually did stay at home. I went back to work, and in fact, when I had my second child, I was pretty senior in the bank, but I remember the EA, and they're only one level down from the board, actually said to me, "You'll be back in months, having the second child." So I went, "Well, I'm going to show you." I took a 4-year sabbatical, and then I actually started my own business, and I didn't go back. So it's choice. It's really that simple, guys. You don't have to make it complicated. That's it. That's all I'm going to say, because I think we just keep driving that horse down, and flogging it, I should say, and it doesn't need to be.
I think it's conversations that we need to have when we start our partnerships. My husband never did anything except when we went on holidays, he would take the children skiing for 2 weeks. I would be there, but I never did anything. But he was always there to support me. And I think we tend to criticise or often speak openly, but what we should be saying, I believe, is that it's a partnership. When you have your first relationship, it's a partnership. When you move on and live with someone, it's a partnership. And just say no, right? I remember when I was trying to teach this to the 3 boys, one of them, the second one, Gray, wouldn't hang his clothes up, and it was always in the house. And I'd said to him, "You leave those on the floor again and I'm confiscating them." And I did. And this sounds silly, but I took them away from him for a week, and he wanted to go out with a girlfriend. And he's on his knees begging me for his cords, right? And I said, "No, until you partake in the house." Now, I'm talking about a stepchild as well. Until you participate in the house, then you can't have those back, because you were abusing my relationship and my being in the head of, working in the house and working. And I think it's just simply that, which is what the other girls were saying. It's about saying we're in a partnership. Now, you might have to teach them, go back to the story about the ironing, you may have to teach them how to do it. You may have to teach them how to cook, because they've probably never done it. Because you can't carry everything, nor should you expect to carry everything. And it's more acceptable for stay-at-home dads now. That certainly wasn't in my time. I didn't, I look back now and I think I would have been nice. But then I think, no, I was in charge of everything, so that was fine. Why would I want to change it? And you can do that too and still have a loving relationship. As I said, we were married for 42 years. But he had his thing and I had mine, and, we worked together.
Yeah. I never had in my head about how am I going to be as a mum? Am I going to be a mum? I was always quite ambitious, and I never had I can't, I won't. Always was I am and I will. And I think that's just natural in me. Having children, if someone was to ask me now, someone a lot younger than me and wanted some advice, I would say, great, well, make sure that whatever role you choose, you are deeply passionate about it, because it's going to take you wherever you want to go, and you find an employer that supports all the diversity. So when you come to have children, if that's your plan or you want to go study, they are supportive of that and they give you that balance. And that career gives you that balance. When it comes to partners, I think I grew up in a house where my mum became the breadwinner. She came through like the horse in front out of nowhere with running her business. And that taught me a lot, because Dad actually had to pitch in and help out at home. And my husband is very hands-on. So we both worked. We were in Sydney with no family. We had to coordinate a lot with daycares. And when I started working with Catherine a long time ago, there wasn't a lot of flexibility. And we actually started paving the way for that working remote as well. So I think things have changed a lot now, but I think if I was to give any advice, I would be about community support, never say never. You can have it all, you can, but you've got to be careful what you wish for, because it will come and then you're in it. So that's my snippet.
You're right, it is about choice and a little bit of negotiation. I think I just thank God every day I married a really great human being that I happen to call my husband, and we were both in the army, and our careers were motoring along as they traditionally would have, and we decided to have our first child, and we actually had a conversation before I fell pregnant about what that would mean for us as a family, and my husband was pretty clear, you are more likely to get promoted earlier than I am, and so I will take the lead on childcare and be the primary caregiver and take some time off work if you are comfortable with that. But it was also then about me not making him feel guilty 10 years later because I missed out on our child. So we really had those conversations. And I also had a conversation with him about don't make me feel guilty in 10 years because I earn more money than you. And the reason why we were able to have those conversations is his two older sisters had those conversations with him about, respect and supporting your partner, and don't just anticipate Georgina will give up work. So we negotiated and that worked really well. And then he had a major career change, which was fortunate that I had been promoted and was earning enough money to allow him to have a major career change and drop half his salary for a couple of years. And so we've always balanced it out. The other thing though is we couldn't do it without family. Both my mother and my mother-in-law raised 5 children each, and they were our greatest supporters. When we were really struggling with childcare, my parents and my in-laws both came to support us, particularly when I deployed overseas and left my husband for 6 and 8 month stints with children while I was deployed, which is no different if he had have deployed. But our family also could see the kind of life we were trying to create for ourselves and our children, and were big supporters in assisting us in doing that. But I don't feel guilty that 4 days a week no one's allowed in my house because it's too messy. 3 days a week my house is okay. 4 days a week it's not. And because it's the fact that I don't want people in a messy house, so I don't let them in. So I'm very, very clear on that. But my husband does most of the cooking. He does the laundry and the ironing, not because I won't, because he does it better than me and he tells me that. However, I have my jobs. So we split our jobs and support each other, and we hold each other to account. I am a gift giver because I always forget your birthday or a special occasion, so then I overly compensate by giving you lots of gifts to make up for that, which means my credit card bill on occasion is outrageous. But he has permission to say that to me, that, you might earn the money, but it's our money, it's our family, it's our commitment. So I accept that he runs the budget and I get my pocket money because I acknowledge and know I'm a gift giver. So it's not that he prevents it, but that has been, don't get me wrong, years and years of trial and error, because when I may have bought an Armani suit in New York without telling him a couple of years ago, that did cause a crisis in our family. So, it's just a lot of give and take. But I know we're running late. My daughter shared a story with me in the car last night about her and her friends and the environment they're in now. They're in their mid to late 20s. They're looking to make connections and for partners, and there's a lot of pressure on everyone. Career, finding a partner, when do you have children? I mean, one of them's 28 and talking about freezing her eggs already. So all I'm saying is enjoy life. Yeah. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, because if you do, you actually might put some barriers up and not find what's actually looked smack in the face. Yeah.
That's a really good point of not looking too far ahead.
Yeah.
And I think you've all highlighted that great balance between personal and professional. So personally being able to have those conversations at home, but equally at work. To me, it's solutions. Come with solutions. And I know Renee and I worked in the same organisation when we had our children, and we had to go to the head of the company and say, look, this is how this could work. Yeah, you know what you're getting from us, you know how we work, and this is how this could work. So I think sometimes it's backing yourself enough to come with those solutions to show the value proposition that you're still going to be able to deliver. As Georgina says, we are running over slightly, and I do want to make sure that everybody gets the time to talk with everyone. So can I ask, maybe Heather, we're going to start off with you. Can I ask you guys just to share, you mentioned, Heather, about giving that advice and being open to speaking with people, which I totally support. I think it's critical. What would be the one piece of advice you would give to a younger, aspiring female leader? So they may be partway through their career, they may be starting, they may be at school. But what would be that one tip or suggestion you would give to someone?
I think, be curious and follow your passion.
Look how succinct you are. Beautiful. Kathy?
Know the
It's okay. It'll pick up.
know the impact that you want to make on the world and go for it.
I always say have some good mentors and role models around you that really light up when they see you and want the best for you. So that's my advice.
I'd probably go somewhere along there. None of us do it by ourselves. So bring other good people around you, whether they're your mentor, your mother-in-law who helps you. You need to make a team around you as you go forward. Would be what I'd say.
So I haven't had an original thought in 25 years. I have a notebook. And I think of myself as a piece of Velcro. And when I leave here, I'm going to jot down lots of things that people have shared with me today. Be a piece of Velcro. Take a bit of everybody away with you and use that to inform your own decisions and the pathway that you want to take, and enjoy yourself. It's a long time. We live a long life. You don't want to be miserable.
And I think it is just be in the moment. Just be in the moment and take that opportunity and say it may fail, it may not. Whatever was going to happen is part of that journey I'm sort of on. Can I ask everyone to thank me in joining these phenomenal women that we have heard from today on our panel?